Hey friends, Happy New Year to you. 2025 is in the books and we're starting 2026, but we're going to take a quick trip back down memory lane for Lubbock's 2025 market recap. And then we'll talk a little bit about the 2026 expectations of what we're thinking we're going to see for this market. So let's just jump into it like we always do. And we'll start with four things this time we're going to look at the market overview of 2025 compared to 2024. We'll look at some transactional data, some pricing data, and some interest rate data as well. So, as we look at 2025 compared to 2024, it's overall really good news. Under contract activity was up about 4.5%. Homes closed up a little over 5%. This beat my expectation. I was anticipating 3.5 to 5% as I forecasted at the beginning of last year. And we finished a little bit over that, which is good news. Median home price and average home price both up, and average days on market down just a touch compared to 2024. Overall, a very good market. We're going to dig into some of this data a little more to give you a little bit better context and perspective. So, we're going to start with the overall transaction numbers going back the last 6 years to 2018 to give you perspective. Of course, as we approach 2021, 2022, those were anomaly years. But if you look at the 4,900 closed transactions for 2025 are right in line with 2020, what we saw in 2020, ahead of 2018, 2019. So we had a very good year overall for 2025. We'll talk why in a minute it didn't feel quite that way, but it was a good year transactionally. Buyers were engaged and home sales were occurring. As we look at the average home price, it continued to inch up. 290 or just a touch over 290 was our average home price sales for 2025. This is part of the reason we saw an uptick in the sales activities because buyers who've been wanting to make a move and who've been delaying it for a few years finally realized home prices are not going down, and that if they want to make a move, it made sense to go ahead and start exploring that in 2025, which many did. As you look at the annual appreciation rates, I thought this would be interesting to you. Average in Lubbock over the last 20 years or so, about 3.5 to 5% annually. Of course, that's been skewed with the 2021, 2022 years. And then, of course, 2023 and 2024 were anomalies on the opposite end, where we saw basically flat growth, up 0.5% in 2023, down 0.5% in 2024. So to see a 2.5% appreciation rate in 2025 is still below average, but it's trending the right direction. So we're starting to see a positive gain in average home sale appreciation rates. As you look at under contract activity, I'm going to just touch on this briefly. As we've discussed before, in 2024, there were only 6 months that year that saw more than 400 homes go under contract, whereas we saw 9 months last year in 2025 that had 400 or more homes go under contract. What's interesting to me is normally when you see us reach the peak of the year around June, July, you see a just gradual decline into December, just stair stepping in. As you look at the last 5 months for 2025, the buyer activity was fairly steady. And I think a lot of that was because interest rates started coming down closer to that 6% range, which kept buyers engaged longer and later than you would normally see into the year. As we look at active listings inventory, last year we started at 1330 in January. We crept all the way up to almost 1,800 homes at one point, and then finished the year at 1,350 as a lot of frustrated sellers took their homes off the market to take a break for the holidays. We'll probably see some of those re-enter the market here again in the next 2 to 6 weeks. Interest rates. Of course, we are now at the lowest rates we've seen in the last 12 months. Nationally, the average for December was just over 6%. Many of our local lenders are right at 6% or just a hair under right now. But as you look at the national average, which you see reported most often, is just about 6.1% average for December. And again, I think that's part of the reason we saw buyer activity stay engaged so late into the fall, is because the interest rates were now getting to a levels that we just hadn't seen in some time. What's interesting now, just some additional data and perspective, we now have as many mortgages with a 6% plus interest rate as we do a sub 3 interest rate. And so we now are getting that threshold where it's a fairly balanced ratio on either end of the spectrum, low or high. About 27% of the mortgages right now nationally are in that 4 to 6% range. And so as home owners are wanting to step up into considering that, it now is a little more palatable as you get that 6% range to jump from, say, 4.5 to 6%, 4.75 or 5 into that 6% range. Overall, about 58% of the mortgages sit between that 3 and 6% range at the moment. But we're now starting to see the trend getting away from the sub 3 as people finally have realized they need to make a move to get the lifestyle they want, get the space they need, or get to the location they want to get to. Of course, you're probably going to have a lot of questions as you see some of this data, or you may have friends or coworkers who do. Of course, we're always happy to answer your questions for you, your friends, coworkers, and no pressure, no obligation. But let's talk just a minute about 2026. What do we anticipate? Well, I think locally we will probably see another modest growth in transaction count. I think home sales this year we'll see probably go somewhere between 5 to 7%. The economy nationally is still keeping financial pressure on households. In fact, a report came out today that about 10% of FHA borrowers were delinquent in October, and we're seeing that tick up as pressure on home borrowers and home buyers who have usually less financial resources using the FHA loans are feeling the stress of the economy and layoffs and pricing increases, that type of thing. So with Lubbock being a lower socioeconomic community, I do overall, and our average home price being a little bit lower, I do think that it will suppress home sales a little bit compared to what you may see in other places. Now, Lawrence Yun, the economist for the National Association of Realtors, chief economist, is forecasting a 14% increase in home sales nationally this year. I think that's very ambitious. He has missed his home sales projections and his interest rate projections the last 2 years. So I don't put a lot of stock. He's a very good economist, but he's just missed on those metrics. And I think that's optimistic. I do think we'll see an uptick in home sales nationally, and I do think we'll see an uptick in Lubbock home sales, but I don't think it'll be as ambitious as what he's anticipating. Interest rates, nearly everyone you follow that's in any credible real estate experience or expertise is forecasting interest rates to hover around 6% for the next 12 months. So you'll see a little bit of variance up, a little bit of variance down. You may see rates as low as 4.85% or so, and you might see them tick up to 6 and 2/8 or 6 1/4 possibly. But I think for the most part, you're going to see them hover right around that 6% range. With that, I think we're going to see more people coming off the fence who've been putting off a move, realizing that the rates are not going back to those 3 and 4% years that we saw the last few years, and seeing that average home prices are still continuing to trend up are going to motivate more buyers to finally make the move and get to the home that they need to for either for lifestyle, for room, whether upsizing or downsizing or moving closer to family. So I do think that with the rates hovering that range, don't expect any big swings there. So if you're trying to make sense of all this, whether or not it makes sense for you to do anything this year or not, or someone you care about that's been waffling and not sure what to do, just reach out to us. We're happy to help, answer any questions, no pressure, no obligation. As always, we appreciate your confidence and your trust in us. We hope you have a great 2026, and we'll talk to you soon.